As if. 2 words, 2 syllables, 4 letters. Such a small phrase, yet it can mean so much. Lately, it's become shorthand for right, like that could ever happen. But it's also a powerful tool for navigating our way through the ups and downs of life. For example, when you learned to drive a car, weren't you taught something called defensive driving? Defensive driving means operating your car as if everyone else on the road is a maniac. I mean, deep down you know they're not, but acting as if they are helps you drive more carefully than you might otherwise. As if can be an excellent safety strategy. It can also be an effective stress reducer. If you're afraid of dealing with someone, maybe your boss or a difficult family member, you can try out the conversation with someone else who stands in for the person you're afraid of. So you have your conversation with this substitute and act as if they're the real subject. And then after a period of as if, you become prepared for as is. Another example, some people who get nervous when they have to do public speaking find it helpful to think of everyone in the audience before them as if they were naked. And I admit it's a rather interesting idea now that I've got it in my mind. The power of as if. And those of you who have studied the power of positive thinking also know that as if can be an important strategy for helping you achieve your goals. You want to be a successful writer? You act as if you are, and the pieces of that puzzle may start to fall in place. You want to have more friends? You act as if you already do, and more could begin to materialize. There's a story about a junior high class that went on a trip to Washington, D.C. and took a tour of the White House. And the teacher asked the kids later to write about their experience. And one teen wrote, "I was especially glad to have this opportunity to visit my future home." Now, I don't want to oversell the power of positive thinking. That kid will most likely not become president someday, but I suspect her odds are increased at least a little by the power of as if. Basically, as if is an example of the human mind's ability to hold what is with what isn't together so that one influences the other. Or as the grammarians among us might say, it's a mixture of indicative mood, straightforward, saying the way things are, and subjunctive mood, the way things could be. And the funny thing is, the world that doesn't exist yet can help you deal with the one that does. Unreality can help you deal with reality. I read about a man who came to his therapist complaining about his wife. He said she was the world's biggest shrew. And the therapist, who was a psychologist in New York and has written a book called Mindful Loving, his name is Henry Grayson, in case you want to check him out. So Dr. Grayson asked the man to try an experiment. He said, the next time you find yourself angry or frustrated at your wife, think about the woman you once loved and remember that image. And at his next appointment, this man told the therapist that his wife seemed more subdued somehow. She must be coming down with a bug, he said. At the next appointment, he said, you know, this is the first weekend we haven't had a big argument in years. I think she must be seeing a therapist or something. Well, eventually he came to see that the change in his wife was actually due to the change in how he was seeing his wife. He was learning that if you act as if someone is a particular way, that person may become that way. Or maybe always was, but you weren't in the right frame of reference to see it before. As if can become, or even reveal, as is. And this is not just true in psychology, by the way. Look at the field of physics. When Albert Einstein came up with his now famous theory of relativity, he did it by imagining himself traveling at the speed of light while looking into a mirror. Now, he couldn't really travel at the speed of light, but in acting as if he could, he came up with a theory that revolutionized the way scientists looked at reality. You see, what isn't helped give him an explanation for what is. Subjunctive mood can sometimes give us a new road into indicative. Of course, as if can be a powerful negative too. If you always act as if you're going to fail, or as if you don't deserve success, that fear can shape reality as well. But you know what's fascinating to me? It's that religion and spirituality are almost totally about as if. Consider the saying in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, I was hungry and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me to drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. And the righteous say, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or in prison? And when did we help you out? And God says, as long as you did it for one of the least of my brothers and sisters, you did it for me. You help the poor, it's as if you're helping me. The Jewish Talmud says, and so the Holy One, blessed be the Holy One, said to Israel, my children, whenever you feed the poor, I count it up for you as if you fed me. And the Buddhists say that when the Buddha found a sick monk at one of the monasteries he had founded, he asked the monks why no one was helping the guy. And they said, well, he's going to die pretty soon and he's not much of a help to the order. So the Buddha kind of scolds them and says, monks, you do not have a mother, you do not have a father here who can tend you. If you monks do not tend one another, who is there to tend to you? Remember that whoever takes care of a sick person, it is as if they were taking care of me. And you'll find the same idea in Islam and Sikhism. In the Hadith or sayings of Muhammad, it is written, on the day of judgment, God will say, O children of Adam, I was sick and you did not visit me. I asked you for food and you did not give it to me. And they replied, you are the ruler of the universe. How could you be sick and how could we visit you? And how could we give you food since you are free from hunger and thirst? And God said, such and such a one was sick and you did not visit that person. Such and such a one asked you for bread and you did not give it. And finally, from the Sikh tradition in India, the story is told of a Sikh water carrier named Ganaya during the time of the last Guru Gobind Singh. The Sikhs were fighting the Muslims, and Ganaya was seen giving water to wounded Muslim soldiers as they lay suffering under the hot sun. And he was brought to Guru Gobind Singh and accused of being a traitor. And the Guru heard the charges and asked Ganaya to answer them. And Ganaya said, when I walked through the battlefields, I saw no Muslims and Sikhs. I saw only your face in every person. Guru Gobind Singh replied, you are a true Sikh. Continue the work, and here is some ointment to put on the wounds. You shall be known as Bhai Ganaya from now on, by being a term of honor among Sikhs and reserved for the best of people. What all these traditions seem to be saying, Jewish, Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, Sikh, is that if you want to find God or the holy, act as if. Act as if the divine is right here in the poorest of the poor. There's an old teaching story about a monastery that had fallen on hard times. Hardly anyone was joining its ranks anymore, and the surrounding villagers seemed to have lost interest in its services. So the community sent a representative to a hermit in the forest who was known to be wise. And the hermit said, the problems you are having are the result of a great sin in your community. And the representative said, well, what sin is that? And the hermit said, it is the sin of ignorance. Ignorance of what, O master? Ignorance of the fact that one of you is the Messiah. When the representative went back and told the community, they were all amazed and wondered who it could be. Was it brother so-and-so? Well, never looked like it, but still. Could it be sister such and such? But she has such a temper. And yet, what if it's me? Impossible, but, well, if it were, how would I act? And of course, the story concludes with the members of the community changing ever so subtly, and the monastery once again beginning to thrive. They never figured out which one was the Messiah, and maybe no one was, and maybe the hermit even knew that. But in acting as if, an if became an is. I must say that this story, and others like it, has always spoken to me, and I use it as a spiritual practice from time to time. That is, I imagine that a stranger I meet, or someone I need to see who I usually have trouble with, is the Messiah, or an incarnation of the Buddha. Only they don't know it, so they probably still have some rough edges. There's a Jewish proverb that says, if you imagine that the person sitting next to you is the Messiah, you will weigh your actions and consider your words. And then if it turns out they are not, that they are the Messiah, you will be glad you did. And if it turns out they're not, you'll still have treated them the way you should. I'll admit, I can't keep this up all the time, seeing divinity in everyone. That's kind of grueling work. But from time to time, I act as if it's true. And I find I'm a better and happier person for it. The next spiritual exercise I want to try is to imagine that I am a Messiah, a Christ come back, a bodhisattva, depending on your religious language, an avatar. And then I'll have to think, how would such a being behave? And perhaps as if will start to become as is. The last thing I want to say is something about our first UU principle. That's the one that says, as Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I don't know how many of you know this, but that's been a somewhat controversial principle. The problem is, it seems to assert a belief or dogma. The dogma is that every person has inherent worth and dignity. What if you don't believe they do? Is that a creedal test we're imposing on new members? And if so, where do we get off telling the world we're a non-creedal religion? What does it mean to say deeds, not creeds, if in fact we have a creed? A minister I once knew was teaching a course in his church about the UU principles. And one of the people in his class, actually a longtime member of the church, said he just couldn't affirm that first principle. If Unitarian Universalism requires me to affirm the worth of Nazis, he said, then I must leave the church. The class had a lively discussion on the topic, as you might imagine. And the minister reminded them the Unitarian Universalist Association has a statement following the UUA purposes and principles that says, nothing herein shall be deemed to infringe upon the individual freedom of belief which is inherent in the Universalist and Unitarian heritages, or to conflict with any statement of purpose, covenant, or bond of union used by any congregation. This is called the Freedom Clause, or Religious Liberty Clause, and it's been present in a number of covenants that the Unitarians and the Universalists have approved over the years. But the minister did ask the question, what are the implications of affirming the worth of only some people? Doesn't that lead to slavery or torture or other kinds of oppression? At that, the man who had a problem with this first principle said, I was among the first to enter Dachau. Nothing you say will sway me from believing that the Nazis were pure evil. No way can I affirm they have any dignity, let alone worth. In the silence that followed, the minister could only say, I do understand. A few weeks later, the man formally resigned from the church. The problem I have with what happened there is that I don't think our first principle is actually a statement about facts or beliefs about facts. That is, we covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Doesn't mean I have to believe every person has some specific characteristic called worth or dignity. What it means, I think, is that I am to treat people as if they have it. Even if I think some people are pure evil, as this man apparently felt about the Nazis. Affirming their worth and dignity means treating them as human beings, yes, even Nazis. Even if they don't exactly deserve being treated that way, nonetheless, I so treat them because that's the kind of person I want to be. So our first UU principle, to me at least, is more about me than it is about other people. And it's not a statement of fact to be believed or doubted. It's a work plan. It's a decision on my part to act in a certain way. And since it can be hard to treat people with respect when you consider them pure evil, the principle gives me a way to look at people that will help me treat them right. So I imagine that everyone has worth and dignity, even if I can't always believe it. I imagine it. And then I can act as if it were true. In this way, it's similar to the statement in the Declaration of Independence that all people are created equal. We're not really all created equal. I mean, we have different talents, unequal abilities, and get vastly different breaks. What all created equal means is that we will treat people fairly and as much as possible give equal opportunities. It's not so much a statement about them as it is about us. And that's the message I would leave with you today. As if helps us live life as it is. It imagines new worlds and sometimes creates them by acting as if they were already there. And even when we don't have the faith to see the divinity in the people around us, as if gives us a bridge, a way to act as if they had that divinity. And in so acting, perhaps we come to see that they do. Or maybe they don't, but we're much too happy seeing messiahs to be too worried about it. And as if blends so often into as is, and as is into as if, that we're not always sure we can divide them up anymore. And we ask ourselves, will we ever really have all the answers to all these questions? And we can only answer as if.